Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the Midweek Takeaway. Today we're joined by Professor Richard Conroy, Executive Chairman of Conroy Gold and Natural Resources. Welcome back, Richard. How's things?
Things are very good indeed. We just this morning brought out a tremendous news release and its implications. As you know, we already have the Clontibret gold deposit. We've already drilled up in a small part of it, 500,000 JORC resource. There's obviously a lot more to come there. But as well as that, we're now seeing in an adjacent area called Corcaskea that there's almost certainly continuity between the Clontibret gold deposit and the Corcaskea target. And at the Corcaskea target, some trenching has been done, and it's been showing very good grades and widths of 16 grams, that sort of amount, and several meters in width. So if there's a link between the two, as there now is pretty well confirmed by this drill hole, that could be of tremendous importance for the future. We already know from Clontibret that there was potential around it, but to have it actually confirmed in the sense of continuity between an adjacent target and Clontibret itself really means that you're beginning to look at several million ounces as the target just around Clontibret alone, and that only down to a shallow level. So it's tremendously encouraging.
Tell us a little bit about the 3 gold lode zones then that you encountered, which was
lode zones were quite nice in themselves, with up to over 8 grams a ton, 8.3 grams a ton, over half a meter, which is quite nice, and a couple of other lodes also intersected, and that's excellent as well. But the fact that it confirms the continuity between the Clontibret gold deposit and the Corcaskea area, where, as I say, you got there in trenching 16.5 meters at 6.5 grams a ton of gold, 12 meters at nearly 5 grams a ton of gold. They're excellent results. So that whole area around Clontibret now is enormously enhanced. And of course, now with a major JV partner with funding is available to do this sort of work, we'd have loved to be able to do it. But of course, we started at Clontibret. All that was there when we first came was just records of gold down the old antimony mine. Now Clontibret itself is looking as though it's going to be a multi-billion gold deposit. But even more important than that, we now know that we have a gold trend extending for 45 miles. That's a fairly substantial gold trend. And we are, having discovered it, we also were able to demonstrate a number of targets along that gold trend. And the likelihood that Clontibret would be the largest or the best, simply because it happened to be the first where there'd been an old antimony mine, is most unlikely. And indeed already we see at Clay Lake, a few miles up the road from Clontibret, a far larger target, as indicated by the golden soil and by the drilling we've done. That's it. It could be much bigger than Clontibret. And
Sure.
Indeed, we've done a preliminary, as I think you know, gold target estimate ourselves. And that was done some time back now. And at that stage, in addition to the 500,000 JORC resource at Clontibret, we're estimating on a pretty conservative basis a further target of 8.8 million ounces just in the northeast of the gold district. So you're looking at quite serious figures by any standards. And of course, again, and I don't think people have even begun to take this on board, is that that's just one part of the 45-mile trend. You can go right down to Slieve Gla, down to the southwest, and you've got a whole series of targets down there. There are targets in between, places like Rock Quarry. So one of the things that we'll be able to do now that we have a joint venture partner and ample funds to do it, is start looking at the gold district as a whole. And now saying only in relation to the northeast, you're looking at 8, 9, 10 million ounces. Over the target as a whole, you could be looking at very, very serious, by international standards, ounces of gold. And of course, under the joint venture agreement that we've got, they will be spending approximately 5 to 6 million in the first phase, which will give them 25% in the overall joint venture. They'll be spending a similar amount to bring themselves up to 40%. So that's a spend which has to be work commitment spend of in the region of 10 million. And you're able to do quite a lot of work for 10 million. And yet it's only the start of it, because to bring themselves in any one project up to 57.5%, they will be covering all the expenditures. And having been round the course myself, I know how much they can amount to, where you're doing your feasibility studies, your environmental studies, your legal requirements, and all the rest that goes into an actual mining permit and planning process. And then, and only then, do they get to the 57.5%. Now, mind you, they're getting that and lots of other opportunities with it, but we still retain 42.5%. If the same thing is done at, shall we say, Clay Lake, same thing, they earn 40% as part of this 10 million plus expenditure we're talking about. But if we're going to develop the Clay Lake project, again, they will be providing the funds that are necessary. And again, we will be retaining 42.5%. Again, if you go, shall we say, down to Slieve Gla, 20 miles away, same process all over again. It is a fantastic deal that we've got. Indeed, one of the things that we saw out at PDEC in June, the number of people and others came up saying, one of the best deals that a junior has got. And it is. Most juniors are very lucky to get even 10 or 15%. But then most juniors, and I've been around the cycle myself, you're lucky to find something like Galmoy, as we did, or involved up in Pogo as we were. Most juniors, it's only one gold deposit or one mineral deposit, whereas we have in the fortunate position, nobody else was looking at it much, to have discovered an entire gold trend, an entire gold district with a whole series of mines there, or deposits likely to be discovered and developed. I see today we brought out this announcement, which is an excellent announcement with all its implications, very positive implications. And yet we can look and see that with a share price down around, I think it's about 12, 13p, something like that. And I know our brokers are suggesting it should be 150p. We ourselves think that's probably an underestimate, but nonetheless, it's when you allow for the fact that we, as of today, have a market cap of 6 million, and yet we have a partner in who has to spend, in order to get a 25% interest, has to spend the virtually £6 million, and then to bring it up to 40%, another pretty well £6 million, and then still has to spend all the money required to bring in a mine, or to get permission to bring in a mine. And that applies over a large area. They'll have their 40%, but each time a project is to be brought in, they are there with the pockets to do the exploration, do the development, get through the planning permission, the mining permitting. It's a tremendous situation that we have. So,
just coming on to that point you make, it's a very good point about obviously the share price and maybe the market not responding. But just going back to the RNS, the two different types of deposit, you refer to the lode deposit, which is obviously the title of the RNS, and then there's the stock work, which we've talked about in the past. Just for listeners, I think it's important to get this point home that the lode deposit can be imagined as a single continuous vein of gold running through like a solid rock formation, which can obviously be followed underground and mined with the gold extracted from that vein. Just picture a long, narrow tunnel that's filled with gold almost. Whereas the stock work, on the other hand, is like a network of veins, fractures and cracks that contain the gold. And obviously that's a little bit more difficult to extract because it's not found in a single large vein. So, I mean, I think that's just important. And that's really important to know that you found those three lodes, and it's going to be easier to extract and mine, right?
Yeah. Oh, in itself, they ignored the fact that it may possibly end up in doubling the Clontibret and Corcaskea resources when you put them together, and that the Corcaskea, insofar as the very limited work, but showing very high grades. But ignoring that for a moment, the actual drill hole itself is very good to intersect three lodes, and you just described them very well. And we're getting figures of up to 8 grams or over 8 grams a ton in one of those lodes. So it's in itself if it were just one of a series of holes in itself, it'd be very, very nice to see 3 gold lodes, I can tell you.
Yeah. What sort of distance are we talking about from Clontibret now to Corcaskea? I mean, we're talking 500 meters, I think you said in the RNS, but is the potential that Clontibret goes a bit further the other way and Corcaskea goes further the other way as well, as we're open in all directions?
Clontibret itself, the gold deposit there that we've discovered, it's open in all directions, and it's also open to depth. And they've been open in all directions means that even the 500,000 ounces that we so far have as a JORC resource is obviously open to very considerable expansion. And down to a certain depth, let's say expansion up to, shall we say, 2.5 million, something in that sort of order, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. And that ignores the potential at depth. I'm sure you'll be familiar with the Fosterville mine out in Australia, very, very similar geology and mineralogy to Clontibret, and mined quite successfully at a shallow level for a number of years. Then they went down a bit deeper and found that they had even better gold at a deeper level. And that may well be the same case at Clontibret. Certainly, as far as we've gone down, we've kept encountering gold. So there's no reason to believe it just won't continue on down. And sometimes it can get even richer, as it does in Fosterville. So that's Clontibret. But of course, it's not just Clontibret on its own. In the surrounding area of the license, and in this particular instance, about 500 yards away from the Clontibret deposit, is a very interesting area that we call Corcaskea. And it's looking very nice, and particularly so in that a couple of trenches that have been put down there. So they're obviously trenches, they're just literally shallow at the surface. And they've come up with some excellent results, particularly so when you're looking at it over 6 grams a ton. 16 meters is a long, wide section. You were describing a vein there, or a lode a few minutes ago. If you can imagine a lode now that's 16.5 meters wide, it's a pretty wide lode. And when it's at 6.5 grams a ton, you're very pleased. And if you've also got another lode, which is 12 meters, which is not to be sniffed at either.
Absolutely. So, Professor Conroy, I'm going to ask you a very blunt question in terms of the investors, okay?
Yeah.
If DeMere turned around tomorrow and offered you a check for £60 million, which basically is 10 times the market capitalization of Conroy Gold today, what would you do?
I would thank them for it, and I would reject it, because my own personal view is not only that our share price should be, at this moment in time, a reasonable share price would be 150p. I think it should be several times that, and I, from a personal point of view, will be looking for what would be the equivalent. And I'm saying this as a personal point of view. It may seem ridiculous to you at this stage, but I've seen it before at Galmoy and elsewhere. It should really be about 700 to 800p. So although I would thank them for that offer, very much indeed, I would be saying, look, if you want to buy it, you'll have to multiply up a little bit more than that. It's a huge opportunity to have an entire gold district and be in a situation where you've got the funds, abundant funds to develop it. They'll be doing very well also. They have the district. They'll have 57.5% of each mine that comes in. It's a huge opportunity for them. That's why they've done the deal with us. I can tell you, they're not softies or anything like that. They knew what they were about.
Very good. Well, on that positive note, Professor Richard Conroy, I thank you for your time, and we look forward to you updating the market in the near future.
Thank you. Good to talk with you.
And you.
Thanks.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net.